Welcome. My name is Kelly Riordan. I'm a classical musician turned creative entrepreneur, and this is the best platform for musicians that are looking to shape their career by thinking outside the box. Katie, thank you so much for being here today. I know, as we were kind of joking about before we started the recording, we've been on Instagram for a while together.
Yeah.
And you're kind of going back and forth and comments and likes, all that good stuff. But it's really fun to actually meet you face to face.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having me.
Of course. As always, I just want to go right to the beginning. And obviously, as we can see in the background of your video right now, guitar and ukulele are definitely your thing. When did you first pick up? Was it guitar first, or was there a different musical instrument at what age?
So it's funny because my principal when I was studying was actually voice, but guitar was the first instrument that I really picked up when I was like 8 years old. It was more so just like I wanted to be cool kind of thing. And I thought that I thought guitar was really cool. And so that was what initially kind of pulled me to learning. But I started, with guitar lessons kind of casually just for a few years. And then ultimately I had a music teacher that was like, "You're a pretty good singer." And I was like, "Ooh, really?" And, as a kid, if somebody's like, "You're good at this," then you pursue it. So I started voice when I was probably 9 or 10. And then I studied that all through college. And that was my principal in school too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And, we'll talk about your career and everything in a second, but as you were going through school, were you also still playing, or were you mostly just singing? I mean, obviously it's your principal, but were you still doing some playing on the side and any performing?
Yeah, I would say I've always thought of myself as like a singer, guitarist kind of person.
Cool.
And so honestly, school was a little tricky for me sometimes because it was so classically based. Because I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but I did music ed. So that was very more on the classical side of things. So that I enjoyed that, but I always kind of at heart was the girl that sang and played guitar. Just for fun, singer-songwriter type stuff. So to be honest, in college, I probably got caught up in the classical side a little bit more, but a lot in high school and stuff, I would do a lot of open mic stuff and all that kind of thing. That was really where my heart was. So
that's awesome. Yeah. Did you ever feel in college, because this is something that I think happens to a lot of musicians, that maybe you have side interests or passions either in other genres or even just outside of music. Yeah. And there's this, I don't even want to call it rhetoric, but there is a pretty cohesive effort within college education programs, music education programs, to just put you into music. And I totally understand why. If you're focusing on the one thing, you're going to get the best at that one thing.
Right.
But did you feel in any way like that was taking away some of your creativity or autonomy as a musician?
Yeah, I would say in a way. I definitely think, of course, it helped me strengthen in other ways. And it's not that I don't enjoy the classical side of things. And, I have a huge heart for choir. I wanted to be a choir teacher for a long time too. And so I think, as you invest your time in things like that, you grow to enjoy that more. But it definitely, I would say, to be honest, probably took away a bit of that, focus on what I really truly did love the most. Which is hard because, there is kind of this path of, I knew I wanted to be a music educator. And so that was the ultimate path that I had to take, was to follow that kind of classical route and everything, which wasn't necessarily where my heart was. And so there was kind of that divide. But I do think, I have a heart in both places now. So it developed the other side of it, even if I kind of focus less on, my favorite part of it. So.
Got it. It's something that I think is really common. I see a lot of colleagues, especially with my master's program, there was a open mic bar downtown, and people would get booked to play there, but you could also on some nights they would just allow anyone to play. And it was fun to see what people would come up with, because you would hear a variety of ensembles. There's a lot of students performing jazz that, again, in school, they're in wind ensemble. They're so focused on one thing, and maybe that's their side hobby or side passion. And, there's not a whole lot of funk trombone lessons going on in the classical music department, but you'd still hear it on a Friday night, and that was really fun. So it's good to honor both of those parts of you for sure.
For sure.
So after school, did you move? Did you change locations? What came after for you? And did you start teaching right away?
Yeah, so I'm originally from the Atlanta area, which I know you lived in Atlanta for a while. So
yep, spent a couple of years down there. Love it. Go Dogs.
But went south to FSU, Florida State University, for university, which I love. That's what I wanted for forever. And then the thing about FSU is, as an education major, you have to do a semester of course in the classroom, but we had to leave Tallahassee to do that. We had to go somewhere else in Florida. So most people would like go to their hometown or whatever. But for me, I couldn't do that because my hometown wasn't in Florida. So I ended up going to Tampa. And I ended up living there for 2 years. So I did my internship there, and then I got my first teaching job there as well, where I taught for about a year and a half. So my first semester was the school in Tampa, and then I taught in St. Petersburg. And when I was going through school, I started out as like a choral music ed major. But then like about junior year, I realized that I really liked working with like the really young kiddos. That was my favorite. And so I switched to general music ed. And so I did my internship in an elementary school. I know a lot of programs you kind of do half and half, like you do some in elementary, some in high or secondary, but for us, you just kind of pick one and you do your entire internship there. So that's what I did. And then I got a job in an elementary school in St. Pete teaching music.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And obviously, we're going to talk about private lessons here in a second, but you were also teaching outside of that, it sounds like. Did that happen pretty quick? Were you doing that at the same time?
So honestly, my journey into teaching privates is a little bit of a different, strange one. So I lived in Tampa for 2 years, and then I think I was like 25 years old, and I was like, I had always wanted to live abroad. And so I had this, some might say quarter life crisis, but also like maybe the best thing that ever happened to me, where I was like, I have to move abroad. And so I ended up actually quitting my job, and I moved to Prague in the Czech Republic for a year. And I could have done, they have some programs abroad that are like teaching music in like international schools and stuff, but you usually have to commit to like a 2-year thing. And I was really scared. And so I was like, I'll just do this temporary. So I taught English. So I ended up teaching in person, like in an English school in Czech Republic. But then I also started teaching online English with a company called VIP Kid, which is, they don't do the same thing really any longer, but that's actually what got me started teaching online. And then lived there for about a year, continued to teach online, traveled a bit through Asia and was like a backpacker for a bit and continued to teach online, and then came back to the pandemic. And so I originally got like a job, as a substitute elementary music teacher when I came back, but then, COVID hit and I was, stuck with basically no job. And so that's when I found a platform called OutSchool. And it was really popular in the kind of VIP Kid world. These people that were teaching English online, they're like, hey, there's this new thing called OutSchool. Like, you should check it out. And I saw that it basically, if you don't know, OutSchool is like a platform for online virtual classes for kids. And when I saw that you could teach music, I immediately was like, this is like 1,000% for me. Like, this is like, sent from above, like exactly what I needed. And so I immediately just like went all in and created all these classes. And I was teaching, full-time hours within like 2 weeks and started making a full-time income like right away. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So I ended up, because I knew I loved teaching music, but when I was living abroad and stuff, I kind of found this newfound freedom, of like your own schedule and not having to like report to anyone, having this freedom is
being your own boss is not so bad. Yeah,
exactly. And so, when I came back and I was doing that elementary substitute job, it was really exciting because I missed teaching music, but at the same time, I was like, I don't know if this is for me anymore,
Yeah,
like just being tied down to the classroom. And so when I found that opportunity and I realized that you really could make a full-time income, not even just teaching private lessons, but like doing that online and being able to live remotely and like live wherever I wanted, which was like a big part of my heart at the time, that was like, a sell for me. So I was like, all right, let's go for it. And it worked out, so.
So what did that kind of transient life look like for you? If you're backpacking through Asia, but you're still teaching online, like how were you finding places to teach online? Were you still following a strict schedule? I mean, that obviously it's something I think a lot of teachers would love and aspire to, but it feels a little scary, obviously, to take that leap. So what did that look like on an average day, maybe for you?
Yeah, for sure. It was honestly very different in Prague than it was in Asia, because Prague, I had like a home base and then I would travel every weekend. So like on weekdays, I would like go into my school and I would teach in person, and then I would teach from home in the mornings online. And like I said, I wasn't doing music at the time, but I could have been, I had a guitar at my apartment in Prague. And so, I could have done it if I had known it existed. Honestly, I didn't even know like teaching music online was even a thing at that time. or I would have done it. But so that was a little more stable. When I was backpacking, that was definitely a different story. I don't think I could have taught music while backpacking. I don't know. I mean, some might argue otherwise, but it definitely would have been more difficult. But yeah, what I would do was I would teach on the weekend. So I would teach all day, pretty much Saturday and Sunday, and I would get like a private room in a hostel for those days, and I would teach all day. And then during the weekday, I like pretty much wouldn't teach at all, and I would just go explore and then move every couple of weeks to like a different location. So
that's
really
awesome.
Cool.
Did your students know that you were moving around a lot? Were they aware that you weren't always in the same places?
Yeah, it was a pretty common thing for people who taught for that company, I would say. And English wasn't exactly their first language because that's what we were teaching. And so, but I would explain it. I'd be like, I'm actually in, Vietnam right now. It's not that far from you, or so like that. So yeah, but
that's awesome. That's awesome. Now, when you transitioned back and you were teaching a little more online, and I think it's kind of a similar story for a lot of private teachers that all of a sudden shutdown happens and crap, we have to figure out like what we're going to do, how we're going to teach online. I'm assuming that transition was a lot easier for you because you're already used to it.
That's true.
But did you have to do any equipment upgrades, or what did you do to prepare your studio for being online?
When I first started teaching online, I like teaching music online to clarify, I was the brokest I'd ever been. So I definitely did not at first invest in any sort of fancy equipment or anything like that. I honestly used like the built-in webcam on my laptop, like on my MacBook. And then I did probably buy like a blue Snowball microphone, $50 microphone, when I first started. And that was pretty much my setup in the beginning. I've upgraded since then, now that it's like my full-time thing. But I feel like it's really important to know, like, you can get started with the basics, I feel like musicians, like, we really like, sound quality and audio engineering and all that stuff. But like, we can get a little fancy with it. And especially for me, like, I'm working with kids, like, I don't know, it can be a little bit more casual to get started, especially. For sure.
That is discerning of an ear. But I think that's a real issue for us, is like this idea of kind of perfectionism, and it's a theme for musicians in general. It's not just when we're talking about audio and video equipment, but you toil away in your practice room and then you have to be ready for the performance before anyone hears it.
Right.
And I think we apply that to a lot of things. So that could be like, posting on social media, even like it has to be the right thing. It has to be totally polished before I share it, or teaching online. I have to have all the equipment in the setup and know exactly what I'm doing before I get started.
Definitely.
And I just don't think that's how most of society outside of the arts function. People like try things all the time, and we are so hesitant to do new things. It's kind of a wild situation. But in your teaching, as you were getting started there, what were some things or some roadblocks that you hit, especially for music? And we can touch on both, because obviously when you start online for English too, I'm sure there's a lot of roadblocks and we're doing something that's totally out of your regular comfort zone. What were some things that you ran into and how did you solve them?
Yeah, I would say when I first got started, first of all, it took me a little while to find my sweet spot of what to teach, which I know wouldn't necessarily be the case for some musicians. Like, you have your primary instrument, so that's what you're going to teach. But being on a platform, it was kind of, it's a marketplace, so you have to do your research, see what's in demand, what do families actually want. And so in the beginning, I put a bunch of different lessons out there. I put out like elementary music, like singing classes, GarageBand, guitar, ukulele, like so many different things. And then I would kind of just see what the response was, and then lean into the things that did the best. So, it took a little while to find my niche per se. But of course, guitar was definitely the most in demand, and that's why I teach it now. I also just enjoyed teaching guitar, to be honest, more than voice for some reason. So that's why I decided to lean into that. So that was probably my initial struggle. But then, of course, the next one would be that I was teaching group lessons a lot. Most people, of course, would start with private, so maybe they wouldn't have this struggle, but kind of trying to find the balance of having, 3 to 10 kids in a class at one time over a Zoom call and like teaching them how to play an instrument is like definitely a foreign idea. It's like, how would I even go about that at first? So figuring out, I guess, the technical side of that was probably my biggest struggle. But yeah, I feel like I've got it down now pretty well.
But I mean, I'm sure after a lot, I mean, now we're looking at like what coming up in 3 years of online music teaching, you
Yeah.
probably got it down pat. And obviously, outside of teaching, you do other things. And so, if
Yes.
people aren't aware of who Katie is, not only is Katie an online music teacher and a very good one at that, but the reason that we connected, as I hinted earlier, is she's really active on Instagram and on YouTube as well.
Yeah.
You put a lot of great content out. What kicked that off? Was it just like, I'm already creating these online lessons, I might as well record a little bit of it?
Yeah. Yeah. So how it kind of started was I was teaching on the platform, and I kind of had this, fast success on the platform, which isn't normal. It was just that COVID hit and it was like a new company. And so it just hit off at the timing that I caught it. But then I was like, how do I scale from here? Because I was teaching so much and I felt really exhausted. It was a lot. And so I'm like, how do I grow my income? How do I lower my hours? So I started getting active online as a teacher, like as a music teacher, to try to gain my own students. But then the more that I shared, the more I actually heard from other teachers that they were like, how do I do what you're doing? So I think there was just a lot more traction with those topics.
Yeah.
And I could tell that that's what people needed more from me. Necessarily than growing my lessons themselves. And so that's kind of what I ended up transitioning to, was helping other people do the same thing. So helping people get started, teaching online in general, teaching with my platform specifically. So that's kind of the transition that ended up happening. So that's what I usually talk about on my personal Instagram. I have an Instagram too for my studio and stuff, but that's where, a lot of my active online stuff is with my coaching one for sure.
That's awesome. And the content that you put out, I mean, it's coaching specific, but you also are pretty open about things that you are working on, or your location if you guys are traveling. And I mean, like this week you got a really, really cute, adorable little puppy that I am hoping makes an appearance later. I'm crossing all my fingers because it's so cute. Oh my gosh. But you do a great job of sharing, I think, a lot more of your life than just your teaching or just your coaching, what's going on. Has that always been the case on your social channels, or is that something that's evolved over time?
Yeah, I would say it's kind of always been the case. When I first got started, I actually ended up joining a program that was like how to build an online business. I feel like a lot of people that have come across this route have taken some sort of, course or mentorship of some kind. And, as much as I used to cringe at the idea of like building a personal brand per se online, it really is. People care so much more about who you are, and that's why people often choose to work with you. And it is, the reasons outside of just your credentials or your experience. It's like, okay, well, what's your personality like? Like, who are you as a person, and what are your true values like? And so I feel like that stuff I've known from the beginning has just been just as important, to all of the other technical, more professional related stuff. So, and I like sharing it. I feel like the people online, it's definitely become more of like a community thing. And so I really enjoy like seeing that on the other side of people too. So yeah, I think it makes it more fun and personal too.
You make social media friends. It's a very, it's an interesting world to be in. That's for sure.
It's really strange, honestly. But
when you sit down to create content, do you normally have a plan? Like if you're going to put together a video, for example, for Instagram Reels or for YouTube, do you sit down and know exactly what you're going to say every time? Like write a script, like that level of intensity? Or is it more, I have this thought and I'll just hit record and see what happens?
Yeah. To be honest, I wish it was a little bit more of the second half. It's definitely much more planned. Like you said, I feel like as a musician, I definitely suffer from perfectionism, like recovering perfectionist my whole life. So I definitely have a plan when I start out. I try to approach things with a lot of strategy just because, that I am very kind of type A, as you might say, very logical, very strategic. And so I like to come at things in a way that I know is, optimized, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So I definitely plan things out from the beginning. And when I do approach a new platform, I try to find guidance. Like when I got started on YouTube, I have like a YouTube coach who is now a good friend of mine as well. And, they help me get started and learning how to script things out and stuff like that. But yeah, I definitely do try to plan it out. It's a lot of work.
And honestly, I think asking for help and that mentorship is also a really big challenge. And which is funny because we go through school and we have a teacher the whole time. And then we graduate and we're like, nope, I'm good. I don't need any help. I can do it on my own and make it happen. And while that's, possible, of course, like you build up out school really, really fast. And even when I think back to my own studio, like when I started on my own, it was by myself that it grew, but also I was still asking for advice from people that I respected and people in the community and teachers that I knew that were, had huge businesses that I thought were amazing. And I wanted to know what they were doing that worked so well. I was asking for help all the time. That doesn't seem to always be the case. I think a lot of us keep what we're struggling with inside and we don't ask for that support. So what led you to look for a coach or for support? Was it something that you just, that's part of who you are and you do that intrinsically, or is it more something that you have to like talk yourself into, like, okay, I'm really struggling and now I think I need help?
I think it's probably a combination of both. I think that as a recovering perfectionist, I definitely like to approach things in a way, like I said, that is strategic and that I know I have a plan. I don't like to present things to the world unless I feel that I've put my best into it, and I've made educated decisions, and so I feel like it's hard to do that when you haven't learned yet. It's like, how else are you going to learn if you don't seek that guidance? I had a couple of friends who were outside of the music world who had like become a part of the online space and kind of this like online entrepreneur space too. And I'd seen the success that they had. And I was like, wait, this is really cool. Like I could do this, So having kind of, I guess, connections with other people too, and feeling comfortable enough to ask for that help, I think was also very, very helpful too. I'd say it was a combo for sure.
That's awesome. And it's something that obviously can get you there a lot faster, but it's hard to start. It's hard to ask for help. So it's good that you are like reaching out and getting that support, but also that then you're turning on and providing that support for other people. Right. It's this wonderful little cycle that you're providing.
Yeah.
When you first started, especially teaching music online, what is something that you wish you had known that now you're very aware of, but maybe advice you would have given yourself back in the beginning?
That's a good question. What I wish I had known. I wish that I had known that. Let me think for a second.
Putting you on the spot. Sorry.
That's okay. I would say, so many things. Gosh. The first one being that I feel like when I was in the classroom, and a lot of teachers are this way, especially classroom teachers, like music educators, you always put the needs of your students first. And you always, that's like the heart of the job, is the students and, helping them progress and helping them, not only in music, but also in their personal lives. And that can also be like really, really exhausting. And I don't know if we shine the light enough on how difficult that can be personally as a teacher. And I think a lot of teachers, they just think that they have to hold that burden if they're going to be a teacher. And I feel like that's just not true. Like there are other ways to balance being a music teacher and also, not feeling that way, still being there for students, but not in a way that's like draining you as a person. Like I think I really loved my classroom job and it was incredible. And like same thing for people who are teaching private lessons, 30 hours a week maybe. But to me, like it's just not sustainable. And so I guess being able to have teaching time, but I also focus on building up other ways in life that are going to sustain me long term in a way that I don't have to necessarily rely on live teaching hours. So I guess, if you're in the classroom, being able to build up something on your own in general, going off on your own in general, so you don't have to, deal with the stress that comes with being in the classroom. And then on top of that, once you have that kind of your own gig, also being able to build up something on the side that's going to in turn eventually help you to decrease those live hours, because
absolutely.
Yeah. Then family happens and you don't want to like miss out on your income, if you're not going to trade as much time for money anymore. And so focusing on more like maybe passive income opportunities, basically.
Absolutely. This is something that I think we do gloss over a lot. There's a really, really strong relationship between students and their music teachers. And part of it's because if we're in a classroom setting, frequently we're with those students, especially at a general music education level, for sometimes 6 years if we're there from kindergarten through fifth grade. And specials teachers in general have that relationship, but then in music, because we're also working students through emotions and expression so much, I feel like music and art teachers, we hear it all. Like we are so in tune with what's happening with our students emotionally. Not saying that their classroom teachers aren't, but you're getting over that first initial month of school, getting to know each other, period. You already know all those students from the previous year, and they're relying on you, and they have those interpersonal relationships with you. It gets even more complicated in the private lesson teaching, because you're with that student one-on-one for sometimes an hour every single week for years. And frequently everything about them, and sometimes things that their parents don't even know, because there's that kind of trusted relationship with an adult that is not a parent. Right. And so there are tons of things that get confided in us, and it is an emotional burden and a toll. Yeah. And as you're taking those things on, and probably a little bit different in some group lesson settings online, but you do still work with a lot of students ongoing. How do you manage that? If that feels like a weighty day of teaching, what do you do to support your own mental health and well-being and self-care to not live with that heaviness and that burden if, maybe a lot was put on you that day?
Yeah. I definitely have experienced burnout, all that stuff as well. And like you were saying, there is an emotional burden of being a teacher. And I do it's still important to be there for your students for sure. But I think learning how to turn it off is so important, especially when I guess classroom teachers as well, but I would definitely think that as entrepreneurs, you feel like you have to be working constantly all the time, doing, your time is your own. So instead of working, 40 hours a week, you're working 24/7. And so just being able to set those boundaries to, get back to your life, and prioritizing the personal moments in your life, and remembering it's just work. And yes, I love my work and it's so important to me and it gives me so much fulfillment and I'm so passionate, but there does need to be the separation, and to have the two, I think is really important.
Well, especially when you're working from home, it's not like you get to turn off your computer and then have the drive home to decompress. Right. I love having my physical studio for that reason. No matter what happens that day, I have a 20-minute drive home where I can listen to music, I can listen to a podcast, I can call a friend and just totally decompress and separate. So by the time I get home, it's done. And I don't have to rehash it all to Isaac or anything like that. Right.
So true.
But at the same time, when right now I am home, that's where my normal day-to-day exists. And I know it does for you too. You just get up from your desk and you go to your couch and it's a 3-second walk as opposed to a 20-minute drive. Yeah. So are there routines that you have, or is there anything that's helped you with that separation?
Yeah, I would say routines for sure. Or just building. I think once I got to the point in my business where I was sustainable, but I needed to focus more on systematizing things and making things more sustainable, I think I was better about truly mapping out a schedule for myself. I do this from this time to this time. And then once I'm done with that, I turn it off. Or I used to work, almost every night. Even after I was done teaching, I would work on other projects that I was doing, whether that be coaching or whatever. And now at least setting the boundary of, okay, well, I can only do that, 2 nights a week, or I never, ever, ever work on the weekends. I know a lot of entrepreneurs, Saturday, Sunday, you really, grind and get some time in, but I'm very strict about having Saturday and Sunday off, and spending time with my partner instead and not letting myself, dive into that. So I would say just having a very routine schedule. I use a project management system that I can really, truly, have my tasks spread out so I don't feel too overwhelmed, day to day. And I feel okay closing the laptop at night, So just building systems and routines that, can help.
That's awesome. What project management system do you use? Now I'm curious.
Yeah, I'm actually obsessed with mine. It's called ClickUp. So I used to use Trello. I know really popular ones are Trello, Asana. It's kind of like Airtable, where it has a lot of customizations, but I love it so much. It has a lot of automations and nitty gritty like things you can customize in different views and stuff. So if you're a nerd with like organizing and color coding and stuff, you should check it out because yeah, it's my favorite thing ever.
That's awesome. I think year one of a business two versus years 2 and 3, it looks so different. I remember when I started coaching, I was still teaching full time. So I was like teaching 26 hours a week and then coming home and taking calls, or taking calls in the morning and then going to the studio and teaching and then coming home at like 8 p.m. getting back on to take calls. And then like, where else do you put your time? So of course it's going to lead into the weekend because you want to help people and they're ready now and they're okay with Saturday and Sunday. So like, okay, I guess I will be too. And you just kind of roll with it. But I have distinct memories of like people coming to visit us and stay with us even. And like we live in a 1-bedroom apartment. So I always kind of laugh that my like best kept secret, which is not a secret at all, is that this desk is where my dining room table should be in my 1-bedroom apartment. Just doesn't exist. Like that is literally the corner of my couch right there. And when we, and I like where I live, I'm like not trying to change any of that. I like that setting, but at the same time, like friends would come and visit us and I would literally make them wait in the hall because I still had a call going on. And like they can't come in because I don't want the background noise. And like I kick myself now. I'm like, that was so dumb. Like, why did I do that? You know, at the same time, there's so much excitement around it. It's hard to set those boundaries and think, do the automation.
Especially in the beginning, like that can be okay. You know, I do agree.
Like you've got the energy.
Yeah, you've got the energy. The hustle in the beginning can, you know, help you get off the ground. But yeah, it's just definitely not sustainable long term for sure.
Yeah. Now I think about taking a Saturday call and like there are circumstances where I will, like if a client has an emergency, of course, you know, there have been several times in the last couple months where I will absolutely do that. But on an average weekend, like that space is helpful. You need it a little bit.
Yes, definitely.
Do you find that in your content creation, like if you're going to get on Instagram stories, for example, are you also creating those boundaries over the weekend? Or is that something that you're okay to do 7 days a week because it's a little more organic?
Yeah, I would say I don't do it on the weekends. I probably could do it a little bit more, to be honest. If I do ever post on the weekends, it's mostly just personal stuff. It's like, you know, whatever I'm doing on the weekend. Or if I have some sort of launch going on or something, I'll definitely like schedule it ahead of time. Like you can do scheduling posts for Instagram and whatnot. And so I try not to do, any of that over the weekend. But I feel like it's important, you know, because even the people, you're putting out the message of like, this is what my life is like. And so if people are going to want to work with me, they want to see, they want that too, you know? So if I'm working on the weekends and then my clients see that, you know, they probably don't want to work on the weekends, you know? So I feel like it's almost, it can be a good thing because it shows that I have balance in my life and that's ultimately what they want too. So yeah, I'm pretty good about, I don't post very much on the weekends at all, but I try to.
That's awesome.
Monday through Friday. I feel like it's important.
That's awesome. When someone comes to you and so now they've watched all your content, they're super excited. They come to you about online lessons. What are some of those like big frequently asked questions that you're getting about teaching online?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest one definitely is, you know, how to find students. That would be pretty much what I hear from every single person that reaches out. You know, sometimes it'll be a question about, you know, how do I use Zoom or how do I do this technical thing? But usually it's how do I increase my enrollments? Or sometimes pricing questions, I guess. But gaining students is definitely number one.
Got it. And when you are doing your teaching, I think with OutSchool, you have to use Zoom, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so with your students outside of OutSchool, do you also still teach on Zoom or are there other platforms that you're experimenting with?
I definitely have wanted to reach out to something else, you know, because Zoom is fine. But I've of course heard of the other ones that are, you know, better or at least optimized for music, but I haven't because it is a little tricky being tied to the platform. But just having that same consistency or not having to, you know, pay for another membership, frankly, to another device or another software. I haven't decided to yet. I was telling you earlier, like I'm going through kind of the process now of trying to get more of my students on my own rather than on just a platform, because there is always kind of that worry of, well, if you're on a platform, you could get the rug pulled out from under you at any time, you know, or at least they're taking a percentage. And so of course you're missing out on, for OutSchool, it's 30% of the pay that you price your classes at. And so I have tried to branch out. And so I think the more that I get students on my own and off of a platform, then I'll be more likely. I only have about 4 right now. And so I'm trying to kind of navigate the process of finding, I feel like a lot of the tactics, I guess, that come with finding students on your own can be kind of difficult for me because I'm very transient. And so a lot of people, it's reaching out to your local community or whatever that might be. And for me, a lot of times I don't have a local community. And so I'm definitely exploring more of the kind of online route of, creating YouTube videos that are music tutorials and gaining more online students, stuff like that. That's kind of what I'm trying out right now, I would say, with my students.
Awesome. Making TikToks, all that good stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. That's awesome. When you work with a teacher, is there a setup that you generally recommend? I know we kind of talked briefly about getting started and not really needing anything high tech, but are there a couple tech recommendations that you normally give?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it depends like what they're teaching. I actually work with music teachers and just general teachers, like classroom teachers as well. So of course, music teachers, probably I'd recommend having something a little bit more advanced. I always recommend getting a nicer webcam because I used my laptop webcam for quite a while. And then once I got an upgraded one, I was like, my eyes have been opened to this new world. Like you look at yourself all day in this camera, Yep. So that would be my first, after of course a nice microphone. But there are microphones out there that are very affordable that are really good. Like I've used my Snowball microphone for probably 3 years now, and it was like $50. And I know their nicer one is like $100 that people really, really love. So yeah, nice microphone, nice webcam. I mean, little things like for me as a guitarist, I need a fancy office chair that I can move my chair away so I can play. But other than that, I don't get too fancy. I do have a second webcam that I sometimes will set up. So I have a little dock that I can sit on, that I can pull it over. And so I can show my fretting hand on my guitar. And then I can also show myself with my strumming. So if you want to get fancy, maybe a second camera. And yeah, that's all I can really think of right now.
Do you have a webcam recommendation? Because I get these questions all the time too. And so it's something that people talk about all the time. But when we look at them, there's a million trillion options. Is there one that you normally say, this is a good, cheap option to just start with? Yeah.
Well, to be fair, or to be honest, I went with a cheaper one in the beginning. I think I spent 40 or 50, maybe more like 40. And, it stopped working after a while. And so I recently got one in the $60 to $70 range, and I love it so much. And so I don't know, I use Logitech is the brand that I've always kind of purchased. So I have that, always 1080. But as far as pricing goes, I would recommend something more in the $60 range. $40 works, but it is a little bit of a Band-Aid. So yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. Now, when you are branching out right now off of the platform, I know we're trying to find students there, but what's worked well for you on the platform? I know you said it wasn't normal because obviously it was COVID time, but what led to that success? Why did it grow so fast?
For sure. So one, of course, nice thing about a platform compared to being on your own, of course, is that they have, a big audience of learners that are already enrolled. And, the thing about the OutSchool platform is it's not just music lessons. It's just general virtual classes for kids. I think it's 3 to 18. And so, they come on there to learn, it's a lot of homeschooling students that want to learn even just their general studies. So there's a lot of students on the platform, and so, yes, it's become more saturated over the past few years, but it's you put your kind of name into a pool, and if you do, present yourself in a very appealing way, you do great marketing and whatnot, I think it's a lot easier, than finding students on your own. It can be worth the cut. But yeah, definitely some strategies that I did to, do well on the platform would be branding, of course, having a very kind of cohesive look to my classes in general, but also just the messaging that I put across. I am definitely one of those music teachers that prioritizes fun in a lesson. And using music that the student is really excited about. And so being able to communicate, I guess, what's like unique about you to the parents and the families that are out there, I feel like is the most important thing for sure. Of course, there's like the technical stuff, like using good SEO or, designing a good, they have kind of like thumbnails for your classes that come up on the platform. And so those things are important to get seen, but then to like gain that enrollment is really just showing who you are as a teacher, showing off, you can do like a profile video. So having a video that kind of shows off your personality and your teaching style and like, why is their kid really going to enjoy being a part of your lesson, So I think those things are the most important for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's something, one leg up that the marketplaces have is that you can compare those personalities and make sure it's a good fit.
Right.
So that way, if a student's coming to you, it's because they liked you. It wasn't just like you happened to be the teacher in the area that had an opening. Right. And that definitely has its advantages.
Yeah.
I'm sure testimonials help with this. And this is something that, on our side of things, we talk about all the time is having that kind of social proof that, I am a good teacher and I love what I do and I am so good and I love it so much that people say nice things about what I do and write me nice reviews. Do you feel like that helps kind of fuel that forward progress a lot?
Does social proof, like the reviews?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I will say one struggle with the platform is that when I started trying to get students on my own, it's people look at like your Google reviews, or they look at your, honestly, your Google reviews is the most popular one. And so it's a little tricky because with something like a platform, you can't reach out to those families and say, will you go write me a review on Google? You have to keep everything on the platform. You can't say, go add me on Instagram. Here's my email. Like you can't do any of that. And that really is the struggle long-term because that it's like a catch-22 where I'm like, well, if I want to get students off the platform, I have to, find my own. Okay. But to find your own, you need reviews. And so it is kind of tricky, but at the same time, building yourself up on the platform, like you said, you get more reviews. And so of course it boosts yourself on the platform as well. And I will say like, it's important to diversify. Like I am teaching on the platform, but I also, about a year and a half ago, I became a studio. And so I was able to bring on other teachers too. And so my social proof can help them gain more students, which is amazing. And then of course, as I get more students off the platform, I can diversify myself in that way while still having kind of the studio income coming from the platform too. So I think it's important for both,
Yeah. Absolutely. When we say studio, for those that aren't super familiar with OutSchool, basically Katie runs like an organization. So you're able to hire teachers to be part of that. And then there's a small percentage that goes to you also for kind of organizing all of that and helping with the marketing and put together those classes. Do they teach classes that you've previously put together or do they have a little bit more autonomy in designing their own classes too?
Yeah, that's a great question. So exactly. An organization, it's just like a studio. So the way it works is OutSchool pays our organization, of course, for, all the income. And then my teachers have set rates. And so, it works kind of the same way as a studio, but it's a combination of both really. So for me, I have like our most popular classes, like we have an 8-week beginning guitar course that is a group class that's really popular. And so they'll teach that sometimes, but then they also have kind of their own private lessons too. And so I really just let them do their own thing. I provide resources because I really like curriculum development and I've created like slides and workbooks that we can follow along for those classes. And then they can also use those in their private lessons. But then I pretty much let them do, what they're best at. So we have like, like guidelines that we want them to follow, but we kind of let them do their own thing. So. Yeah.
I'm sure you had a little bit of a leg up since your background was in music ed, but when you started teaching group lessons for music online, was there a little bit of a learning curve there? Or did it feel kind of second nature coming from the classroom?
Yeah, I think it's a combo. I know how to manage a classroom with multiple students well from the classroom itself, but I definitely think like doing it on Zoom in general can be, a very different experience. And, it's one that everybody had to learn with the pandemic. I think what works the best for me is having materials that they can follow along with that are very clear, so they can kind of be a little bit more self-directed in their learning. And then throughout the class, I actually keep the students muted and I'm the only one unmuted, and I keep myself spotlighted, so they can see me well, and I share my screen and we go through set curriculum with slides. And I give them all these materials kind of between classes too. I'll give them like a practice plan of you should practice A, B, and C, and that's on workbook page this, and this, and here's a video that you can practice with. And so it's kind of like, I did everything I can, to help you succeed. And so now it's kind of up to you. But yeah, the technical side of it, keeping the students muted is very helpful for sure. So
yeah. Yes, a little distraction free, hopefully. It's a challenge. And I know every classroom teacher and everyone that was teaching group lessons during the pandemic went through this struggle of managing 10, 15, 25, 30 children on a Zoom call. It is a lot. And, I've taught, especially that first summer in 2020, I actually taught a couple like beginning Clarinet 101. I did some in 2021, but it was mostly that summer 2020 where a lot of the local band programs couldn't run their beginner camp. Aww. And so we would do like how to put the clarinet together and play your first 5 notes. And we kind of do it like over 4 days. And you'd have kids that just like, come to 3 days, but they miss the last one, or they kind of come in and out. And that's a challenge too. I mean, with any group class, of course, but especially when you're on Zoom, like I'm trying to like catch up a little bit with a kid that's only been there for half of the classes. And that can cause some, I don't even want to say like technical problems or anything like that, but obviously you want to make sure that everyone is getting what they need.
Right.
What are some ways that you manage that or help to give students that individual attention, even though obviously you're serving a larger group at the same time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say the first one is just great communication. So if I don't have, like a student hasn't shown, I send them a message like 3 minutes in. I'm like, hey, where's Susie? Like, are you coming to class? So that, because it is really common actually that they just straight up forget. And so it helps them to like, oh no, I need to like get on Zoom. And so sometimes they bop in a couple minutes late. So that's the first thing that I'll do. And if they do miss class, like if they don't show up after that, I'll send another message after class saying, hey, we missed Susie in class today. I would really recommend making sure that they catch up on the information. OutSchool does like automatic recordings of the classes. So I always say, please make sure to go back and watch the recording. And here's the practice plan. Like, let me know if you have any questions throughout the week. And then if they show up and they didn't do it the next lesson, I'm kind of like that's a little bit on you. And so I'll try the best that I can to like help them in the moment. With group classes, like I said, we stay muted, but I do kind of do little one-on-one moments. I cap at 6 kids with guitar because I just feel like any more than that, I just can't give any sort of personalized attention. So if we're learning a new concept, like a new chord or a new scale or something, then I will take a little bit of time to pause and be like, let's hear yours and like make sure it sounds okay. So if there is something that a student missed or something, maybe I'll give the rest of the students a warm-up activity and I'll say, you get started on this, and then I'll catch Susie up, the best that I can in the next 2 minutes, and then we'll all be on the right track. But I do pretty much put it on them, to try to catch themselves up as long as I give them the materials that they can do so, on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, especially since you've got the recording of the workbook, then in theory, it should be fairly easy, but it's nice to have that support built in. I'm curious with the students that you're teaching off of OutSchool now. Yeah. You said there's 4. Is that a group class or are those individuals?
No, those are privates. They're private lessons.
Okay.
So, and our setup is a little different. I still, for some of them, if they request it, I still do the recordings, but usually I have some sort of Google Doc that I just put their practice plan, and then I'll link to a piece of music if they need it, or a link to a video if they need it, or something like that. So that's how we usually communicate. And then I'm pretty strict with my like cancellation policy. I try not to do makeups. If there is some sort of missed lesson, then I might do like some sort of video recording or something to send them, or I'll send them, materials that they can use to catch themselves up. But I try not to do too many makeups.
Do you feel like your YouTube channel helps with this? I know you've got tutorials and things on there. Does that help with some of those students that miss a class? I don't know if you can even send those on OutSchool actually, but for your private lessons, is that something you use pretty frequently?
For sure. And you can actually use it with OutSchool too. They just have like a setting so that it doesn't take them off the platform. They have like a thing so that a box pops up and they can watch a video. So for sure. So what I think is really helpful, especially with systematizing lessons and stuff, is just having that set curriculum that you go through. And so every time you work with new students, just kind of following that, and that way I don't have to record new videos every week or whatever, So I do just record the videos that I need for my curriculum, and I have them actually as unlisted on my YouTube channel. And so I send them the video, if they need it and whatnot. So yeah, that can definitely be helpful. And to be honest, sometimes they'll subscribe just because they've seen that unlisted, and so then in the future, I might have like a call to action of you can sign up for more group lessons or for private lessons or whatever. So that can be helpful too.
Got it. And if someone isn't familiar with what Katie said, unlisted, when you publish a video on YouTube, there's like settings of visibility. It's kind of like on Facebook, do you want your friends to see it, or do you want only you to see it, or do you want the whole world to be able to see it? Same thing on YouTube, where you can do a public link that anyone can search and find and watch, or unlisted, where you have to have that specific link. This is a great way to share like recital videos or lesson recordings, or if you're doing like that video exchange with students. That way, like, you're not putting your students' likeness all over the internet, but they can still watch it and use it. And if they want to share that link with grandma and grandpa, then of course they can do that too. So kind of a nice little back end setting on YouTube that is super helpful,
very
frequently used.
For sure.
Awesome. As you are looking forward in all aspects of your work, I mean, obviously in your teaching and in the organization that you have, in your coaching, what are some goals or some projects that you're working towards right now?
Yeah, I would say some goals. Like I said, I'm trying to build our studio off the platform a little bit more. I'm trying to, on the platform itself, I have privates, but I'm trying to move more so to just like group lessons for myself, at least, not necessarily for my co-teachers, but for myself, try to do just groups on the platform, because they bring this, like, that's very much better if they're taking the cut to just have the group pricing, and then trying to get my own private students off the platform. But outside of that, I'm also doing a lot of like curriculum development. I've gotten very much into, if you've never heard of Teachers Pay Teachers, is really popular for classroom teachers. And so, of course, I had heard of it from when I was in the classroom, but it's a very popular website where teachers sell their own curriculum, and then you can also purchase curriculum. And it's very, very popular to purchase curriculum there as a classroom teacher. So you're like so busy, and the textbooks are just not the best, so teacher made materials can definitely be super helpful. So I'm creating a lot more curriculum to sell there, which is really cool because that's really scalable, and it's much more passive. Like, yes, you have to create the product and upload it, but there's a lot of teachers on that platform. So you don't have to necessarily do a ton of marketing to start making sales. And yeah, with my coaching, I'm starting to work with, more teachers. I think I'm getting ready to launch a membership, which is going to be really exciting.
Exciting.
Yeah. So those are some of our upcoming exciting goals.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Thanks.
When you are, as you're kind of transitioning everything right now, when you're trying to find this balance, obviously when you have a full schedule, you've got plenty of work already on your plate, and then you're also trying to launch other things or create this curriculum. Yeah. What are some kind of day-to-day routines that are helping you in that? Obviously, you've got the project management. We talked about kind of creating that separation, but is there a schedule that you kind of follow most days to help block that time off?
Yeah, to be honest, there's no way I could have done all of this myself. I actually have a virtual assistant who's full time with me. He works with me for 40 hours a week. So he does a lot of things for me. I will be very much like a visionary, but then when, like, for example, with the products on Teachers Pay Teachers, I will come up with the idea, and then I will create a template, and I'll create like a outline of the curriculum, and then I'll tell him to create the rest, So, and he's a guitarist himself, so he can do a lot of that as well. So that takes a lot of the burden off of things, and I know that that's hard for a lot of kind of newer entrepreneurs or newer, music teacher, online music teachers, but it is something that ultimately you're going to have to start outsourcing some things, and so that's been a huge help, is working with him for sure. So
absolutely,
that's the main one.
How do you go about finding a virtual assistant? I know we used a service for ours, which was amazing, but since you found someone that is also a guitarist,
I know.
How did you go through that process? That's amazing.
Very lucky. So I actually went through a program. Like I said, I like to seek help, but I went through a program to learn how to do it. But I found him on a website called onlinejobs.ph. He's in the Philippines, which is very common with VAs. It's a super common job in the Philippines. And I went through a very lengthy process of, putting up a job posting, getting a lot of responses, doing a test kind of task where I have them try doing something for me and I see what their work is like, then interviews. And then I did like a trial week with a few of them. And then based on that week and their performance and stuff, I went with, my favorite candidate. Like I said, he was a musician and the others weren't necessarily. And so that pretty much was like, okay, I must hire this person. So it was definitely a very lengthy process, but it was 1,000% worth it. I've been working with him for over a year now. So, I mean, the things that we've been able to accomplish in the last year, like I just can't even imagine what it would have been like if I'd been doing everything myself. It would have just taken me years and years longer, or I just would have been like so much more stressed, but the cost of hiring in the Philippines, it's also much more affordable. Typically it's between like $4 to $8 or $10 an hour. And so I was able to add on just a few hours to my own teaching schedule in order to kind of make up the cost of adding him on. And so of course that's like been very much worth the extra teaching, 2 to 3 to 4 hours a week to have him come on full time and like really work towards a lot of those other goals that I've had. So
that's awesome. After working independently for so long, was it hard to start delegating when you first brought him on?
For sure. Yes. Well, I kind of went through like I don't want to hire anyone for a long time because of course it's scary, you're like, I'm going to invest money into this thing. And who knows, like, of course, like we said, we're perfectionists. Like, are they going to be able to do as good of work as I do? Yeah. Like, are they going to live up to my expectations and stuff? And so, but I think I just ultimately came to this like one day, like realization of like, okay, Katie, it is either you are not going to do the things you want to do, or it's just going to take, a lot longer, or you're going to have to, suck it up and stop being such a perfectionist and bring somebody on and like kind of take the risk, I guess, of investing in that, that kind of work. And it's really paid off. I mean, the amount that we've, like I said, been able to add up, even just with the teachers pay teachers, like building up the passive income, like it starts earning itself back, with time. And I think it's definitely worth the risk. It's definitely been a process to learn, how to explain how to delegate and what to decide to give him and whatnot. But it's ultimately just like, I've learned to only do the things that like I have to do myself, and then I try to let go of all the other ones. So.
Yep. And sometimes you're doing a task and you're like, gosh, this is a mundane task, or it's something that, for example, there's like a Monday morning post that I always do for our clients. And I like this week totally forgot. I looked at it, I was like, why am I still doing this myself? Like, this is absolutely something that I could delegate that I've just been like, holding on to that is absolutely ridiculous. But it is hard to let go of those things. And it's hard to allow yourself that space, because at a certain point, you've been working on this forever. It's like, it's your baby. It's your whole life's work in one business. And it's really hard to just trust somebody else with that. And also when you're used to doing it all yourself, it's just so habitual that letting go of that is weird too, but it is a process. And I think everyone is still learning on that one. It's something that you get better at every day, hopefully. Yeah. Exactly. Definitely days where I regress a little bit, but it's all normal. It's all good. That's awesome. Okay, so in your personal life, obviously, as we talked about, you've got some exciting things coming up. So we've got a puppy.
I got a puppy.
So cute. Oh my gosh. Honestly, everyone just needs to follow Katie on Instagram for the puppy content this week, because I'm kidding. Her content is fantastic. Please follow her either way. But the puppy is a wonderful bonus. That was a surprise. Yeah, was that something that you guys have been planning for a while, or was it more of a spur of the moment decision?
It was actually a combo, to be honest. We were like, we'll wait until after Christmas, because we were like traveling a bunch. Right now I'm spending a lot of time in Toronto because my partner is Canadian. And then my family lives in Georgia. So we were traveling a lot, for Thanksgiving and for Christmas. We were like, after Christmas, we're going to do it. And we were sitting down last week and we were like, okay, when are we going to do it? And then we literally found a breeder that night and then went the next day and then got him. So
oh my gosh. Oh, that's awesome.
So excited.
So cute.
Thanks.
Oh my goodness. What kind of dog?
Every couple of hours, but it's fine.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, you're not getting a whole lot of sleep this week. Appreciate you being here in the middle of all of that. Yeah. Oh, and what kind of dog is he?
He's a mini golden doodle.
Oh my God. He's so squishy. He's got the cute little cheeks. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Anything else exciting coming in way of personal? I mean, you guys obviously travel a lot. Are you planning any travel this year? Or do you think it's going to be a little more of a low key year?
Yeah, my partner I said he's half Canadian, but he's also half Swedish. So this summer, we're going to go see his family in Sweden. But on the way, we're going to try to go to Iceland. That's the hope.
Ooh,
so, yeah, we haven't booked
That's awesome.
the tickets yet or anything, but that's the plan. So
that's awesome. That is so cool. Well, I really appreciate you sharing everything and the journey of how you've gotten here. I know as we're looking at music education and private music education, there are so many paths that you can go down.
Yeah.
And it's just fun to hear this perspective of the online education and using a platform and what that process has been like for you and what's happened since. Because a lot of these kind of 2020 born businesses have really blossomed and there's so much potential online. So appreciate you sharing all this.
Of
Thank
course.
you so much.